I'm talking with Mark Robertson, Associate University Librarian at York University in Toronto, Ontario, who has done some interesting new research on the views of provosts, senior academic officers in research depth Canadian university libraries. So my first question to you, Mark, is what's the purpose, what's the context of your research? Why did you undertake this?
I've always wondered, I guess, for myself, the senior decision makers, senior administrators in the university, we work with them closely in the libraries, and we depend on them for a great deal of support. They're the ones who ultimately hold the purse strings. And so I always wondered exactly what is in their mind, what are they thinking about, how do they see our work, and how is it positioned? And in fact, I was at a conference in 2012, an assessment conference, ARL assessment conference, in which there was a president who was speaking, giving a keynote address, and he just made his name is John Lombardi, and he was a president at several American universities. And he just, after his address, in the question and answer period, he just made an off-the-cuff remark about how he believed that academic libraries should be aligned with more with research and really not so much with teaching and learning, the teaching and learning mission, because he felt that that was a mission that there would always be a pendulum swinging, but it would swing always far more over to the research side. And he felt that too much identification there would mean a possible marginalization of what we were doing. That's a portfolio I care deeply about, teaching and learning. And so to me, that was quite shocking. That was one individual. He's not a provost, he's a president, but it raised the question for me, and there were many people who took issue with that, but it raised the issue for me. I don't know, does my provost, do other provosts, do other presidents think similar things? What is it that they are expecting? So there was a big question mark there, and when I did the literature search, I was actually very surprised to discover that there isn't a lot of research out there already done on the perceptions and attitudes of senior administrators at universities in relation to academic libraries. So there was definite need.
What, Mark, have been your major findings?
Well, on the good side, it's actually quite complex because I was doing interviews, and so it's I was trying to surface the really big trends that I was hearing. On the positive side, I found that the 9 provosts that I was speaking to, these were Canadian provosts at large Canadian research-intensive universities. And by and large, they were quite conversant in developments around academic libraries, which is reassuring to me. And the big takeaway is that they really did feel that we make a very significant contribution to institutional mission. And I wanted to surface in what areas. So for all of them are really a profound role in research, and also on the teaching and learning side. A little less so on that side, but definitely on both sides. What was surprising, I think, was in some of the detail around how they saw that contribution being made. So on the research side, there was really a very prominent focus amongst the provosts in terms of their emphasis on our role in building, providing access to information. And so building, as they say, some of them use the term a knowledge base, and preserving and keeping that accessible. So obviously that's where our money is going, their money is going, a great deal of it in collections. That's very important. But there was much less understanding, I think, and emphasis on the ways in which we are involved in the process of research, less so on the products of information of that process. And so there were some kind of tentative understandings, but by and large that wasn't forefront. And I think that the context is changing, and that's something that we'll need to do more work on. In terms of teaching and learning, we spend a great deal of effort on information literacy, for instance. There was very little discussion of that. Primarily the impact seemed to be around teaching and learning related to the opportunities afforded by library as place. And that was actually, on one hand, very reassuring, because one of the questions I went in was, do they still see that as important? the investment in space. That's a big question.
And it's a big investment.
It's a huge investment. We take up a big piece of real estate. And actually, there was no question, and I was surprised that there wasn't that really even dissent. There was no question that that was a good investment, although the space is changing enormously.
Yes.
And they see that the impact of that space in two ways on students in teaching and learning. And one is the students need a gathering place to work together on consolidating their knowledge of what they're learning. But in addition, many provosts talked about the importance of the Learning Commons model and using the library as a platform where you bring together different kinds of academic support services, and how there's opportunities that we might not have had before when it was more the library was more a storehouse of material, and now there's space being freed up. So some real impacts being seen there. The other thing I want to just highlight sort of on the high level is around services and expertise. I think that it seemed to me that there is an area of uncertainty there amongst the provosts around the kinds of expertise, the ways in which we provide expertise. I think in the past it's been very collections focused. That's been a lot of their focus, but it's their understanding of the ways in which we help the process of research, how we might be embedded in research teams, for instance,
yes,
or curation of data, these sorts of things that admittedly are new but extremely important, and there's hints that they're starting to get it, but there's a lot more work to be done there.
Okay, so speaking of work to be done, perfect segue to my final question and the heart of this course, which is, what light does your research shed on our advocacy for academic libraries and within universities? How should we articulate our messages? What are our essential messages? And how can we, as advocates, strengthen the understandings of high-level academical officers of the essence or essences of the value of academic libraries?
Well, one of the library thinkers I've been influenced by is R.D. Lankes, and one of the things he talks about in his work is the ways in which the importance of rearticulating or reframing the mandate of what libraries do in a digital age. And I think that this emphasis on the role of libraries and librarians in knowledge production in a kind of more global way, a more ecological way, that we're involved in the entire knowledge life cycle at different points. I think that we have more stories to tell around the ways in which we're embedded around the knowledge life cycle, and not just at the point of preservation and access. I was hearing that, and I think that that's an important story that we need to tell. Around also librarian roles, there was some skepticism I was hearing around how can we contribute as being part of a research team. So that's something I think we have enormous things to contribute to. I did ask about indicators of success. What are the things that make impressions with provosts? And they struggle with that like we do. It's a hard thing to know what kind of data really speaks to our success. Usage was big, satisfaction, inputs and outputs like size of budget and size of collections was not. But they kept coming up with soft measures, and they weren't necessarily the hard stats, but things like stories that they were hearing from people in their community, from people in the academic community but outside the university, reputational issues, things that their faculty were saying to them. So I think on two levels, I think that we need to kind of sharpen our elevator speech, really get at that. What is our mandate, and be able to articulate that, and how that's changing in a digital age. But I think also stories clearly still have enormous power. And in addition, I mean, if we have the hard statistics that's to show impact, especially that's enormously important. But in some ways, what I was hearing from them was the importance, the stories that show our connection to institutional mission and how we align with that, so that we're a library that's faced towards the organization as opposed to a library-facing institution.
Facing inward.
Facing inward.
Another major point that Lycus makes.
Yes.
And of course, we have mentioned his work a number of times in this course. It's so fundamental. Thank you, Mark, for sharing your research and your insights and your thoughts about where we can take this research into advocacy.
It's a pleasure.